All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. My name is Angela Peacock, and I'm a subject of the film Medicating Normal. I was trained as a social worker and a therapist, which is relevant for today's conversation, but I was also harmed by psychiatric medication that I took as prescribed. This caused me to become part of this movement of people bringing attention to the untold stories of the mental health field. I also volunteer doing outreach for the film, and we host conversations like this one today. This is our 27th interview, and today our guest is Kelli Foulkrod. Kelli, say hi.
Hi.
We first met Kelli. One of the filmmakers met her and talked to her in depth during the creation of the film, and she thought Angie would really like Kelli. So she hooked us together, and we had a really long conversation, and I'm just so excited about the work that Kelli's doing. I almost feel like if I were more normal, I would be doing what Kelli's doing, but I'm not there yet. I'm still healing from all the trauma and everything. But anyway, so without further ado, let me talk about Kelli's bio. Kelli is a holistic and somatic psychotherapist, trauma-informed yoga teacher, and healing arts practitioner from Austin, Texas. Kelli has worked in the mental health field for 20 years, and for the past 11, she has managed her private practice, Organic Mental Health Center, PLLC. Kelli's specialties include working trauma, PTSD, and c-PTSD, spiritual emergencies, crisis intervention, and helping people find sustainable alternatives to psychotropic pharmaceuticals. Kelli has specialized training in somatic approaches to trauma and complex PTSD, psychedelic-assisted therapy, perinatal mental health, and energy practices, and my favorite, liberation from psychiatry. Additionally, Kelli has been apprenticing in traditional folk healing, and I can't say that word. Can you say it? Curanderismo?
Curanderismo.
For the past 8 years. She is initiated into the Peruvian, I can't say it. I don't want to do it any disservice. And in ongoing relationships studying the Mayan and Aztec tradition. She integrates yoga therapy, energy healing practices, internal family systems, and depth psychology with ceremony and ritual for transformation and empowering individuals to be their own healer. Kelli, will you share a few words about yourself before we jump into the questions?
Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for the invitation to be here and share. With my professional colleagues, I do kind of keep to myself and keep quiet, but I'm not a typical therapist. Some people consider me to be a renegade, and I think outside of the box. And I quickly learned probably 10 years into my career of working in different mental health settings that we had no idea what we were doing in terms of healing. And in fact, especially when I was working in psychiatric hospitals, in fact, I noticed we were causing harm. So about 10 years into my career, I started to wonder if I could even participate in this system because it was so corrupt and filled with deception and oppression that I literally felt wrong for me to do this work. And fortunately, some of you all in your audience may know Dr. John Breeding. He's here in Austin, and he has been a mentor to me. He's also a renegade and was and is still heavily involved in the movement. And he said to me at a point where I was really kind of in a crisis with my career of like wanting to get out of this because of what I was seeing, that, if you want to make change in the system, Kelli, you have to be in that system. And so I'm here today to share about how broken this system is, how much harm and actual psychological trauma that the system is inflicting. Well-meaning people, well-meaning healers, therapists, psychiatrists, right? Some of these people have big, great hearts, but it's the system that is, in my opinion, it can't be reformed. We're beyond reform. So I'd love to share about, new paradigms, new approaches to how we can approach healing.
So I know one of your specialties is that you help people that are coming off psychiatric drugs. And I can tell you, we get emails every single day from all over the world of people that are doing this and they want help and
Right.
there is like literally none. And just to bring this to the present moment, yesterday and the day before, I listened to an FDA and Duke University talk about benzodiazepines and coming off, and I was so shocked, like my jaw like dropped, because the FDA literally came on and said, wow, we're really surprised that doctors don't have a protocol to help people off of benzodiazepines. And I was like, this has been going on for 60 years and the FDA didn't know this? Are you kidding?
Well,
So,
they knew, and they've always known. But kudos to them for at least having a conversation about it at this point.
so yeah, there was a conversation this weekend. Yeah. So how do you help people with psychiatric drug withdrawal? And like, tell me about what you see from your stoop.
Yeah, and I get a lot of inquiries because I'm few and far between. There's not a lot of people like me in the field doing the work. And I have to say, and you all know this, I'm not a medical doctor, so I am not advising anybody to stop taking medication by themselves. The weird oxymoron that we're in is like, in a lot of ways, you actually do need medical supervision, but not traditional Western medical supervision. So I work in conjunction with prescribers. I particularly, because I'm in Austin, we have a wealth of functional medicine and holistic doctors here, naturopaths. And I know that not everybody is as lucky to have access to those kind of thinking prescribers. So I work in conjunction with the prescribers who understand how corrupt this system is, and who are willing to help with the tapering process by prescribing liquid forms of the medication so that we can do a slow taper. They take that to the compounding pharmacy, and then it's so much easier to do it that way, in conjunction with running different labs. Thyroid, hormones, gut health are the three main ones that we're looking at as you're tapering, to make sure that the physical body is staying within homeostasis or within balance. Because this is where a lot of people get hung up in their taper. And I also understand that it's very hard to trust doctors after you have basically been lied to and deceived, right? So finding practitioners you can trust is one of the biggest obstacles, I think. And especially if you're in withdrawal, it can be a very, very scary situation, because you'll go to the practitioners and 9 times out of 10 they're going to gaslight you, not because they're malicious, but because they're uneducated on psychiatric drug withdrawal, and they're going to tell you this is all in your head. There's no way withdrawal could last more than 2 weeks. I'm doing just in talking to other professionals is trying to educate other therapists, psychiatrists, anybody who will listen to me about psychiatric drug withdrawal. I've seen people in withdrawal for decades. I've seen people in withdrawal for months and years. And that's not to scare anybody, but to say, like, this is a real phenomena. I think in the coming years, we're going to have, much like cigarettes, right? Much like the tobacco industry, when we were lied and deceived in that industry, right? And eventually there was this awakening where people were like, oh, cigarettes are good for you, right? Like, I think this is coming with the psychotropics. And so I suspect we're going to need a lot of different practitioners coming up with different protocols. I'm most well versed in SSRI withdrawal, but I've supported people with SSRIs, antipsychotics. The benzos are very tricky. And that's I usually work in conjunction with, for sure, a prescriber on that one. And then the interesting thing is the energetics of coming off of these drugs, that I think that there's not a lot of conversation around this in the movement, that the last 25% is the hardest. There could be physical reasons for that, but I also think there's actual psychological reasons for that whatever led you to the psychiatry in the first place, you got to deal with that. And if that was gut health in combination with trauma, it's usually gut health and trauma in combination. This is the metaphor I use. When you start taking, let's just say, an SSRI, right? You in essence, you are starting to numb your body's homeostasis, your body's wisdom. I suspect that these drugs are actually disconnecting us from our soul. on some level. You can never really not be with your soul, but the lens of your ego becomes disconnected from that wisdom. It starts to numb it down. And so the reason do get benefit from these drugs is that they know the trauma response is numb. It doesn't mean it's addressing trauma. There are no pharmaceuticals that address trauma, period. And so all of the pharmaceuticals address side effects of trauma. They do not address PTSD. And PTSD is the only diagnostic criteria that I will even use, that I subscribe to. That's the only diagnosis. Everything else is made up to sell you drugs. So, so when you go to the doctor, I'm sorry, say, here, take this pill. You start taking it, right? And over time, it's squashing that trauma response, which again is your body's wisdom. And if you squash that for decades, right? And then the side effects 20 years down the road are intolerable and you start to slowly taper, not only has every body been influenced by this drug, the emotional energy has too. So there's physical ramifications, right, of withdrawal. And then so it's like, as you start to, you're putting that lid back up, right, for your soul to come back online and for your trauma to come back up. But the problem is that as you've been sequestering that trauma, right, it's almost gotten more oomph while it's been held down. And so you're going to maybe go to a therapist while you're in psychiatric drug withdrawal to address some of the emotional mayhem that's happening. And it's like you were thirsty and you went to go get a drink from the water hose and somebody turned it on full blast. And you are just being inundated with that emotional energy. And your mind doesn't have the context, right, for that much intensity. And that's why the withdrawal experience can be so terrifying and terrorizing, is that these drugs in essence have numbed, sequestered, and then magnified our experience of the trauma response. And so we're having to deal with that in conjunction with insomnia, soul-crushing depression, right? All of these other side effects of withdrawal, which mainstream practitioners will tell you is a return of your symptoms, and that means you need the drugs forever. So it's a lot, this work, it's a lot. And I can tell you in work that I do with different populations, like you can see faster results with other populations of people than psychiatric drug withdrawal. This is hard, slow work. However, I believe that people who are psychiatric survivors, people that have been harmed by the system and by these drugs, on some level, they do suffer a brain injury. I mean, I do believe that. There's neurological damage done, but it's all healable. It's not permanent. But I believe that as we suffer this psychological injury to our nervous system, the silver lining is once we get through it, it's also an awakening of your spiritual gifts in many ways. It's a deepening of your experience of what it means to be a human. I wouldn't wish this on anybody, however, but there are advantages to this. So I do see people heal. It's just not quickly. Time, the nervous system will heal itself eventually. So
thank you for saying all that, because I know a lot of people in our audience get really worried that it's not healable, they're not going to heal, that it's permanent, because it just feels so permanent. It's so
it does.
disabling.
And we oftentimes don't have peers or mentors to look to be like, hey, did you survive this? How'd you do it? Right? We have survivingantidepressants.com, thank goodness, but like we have real people in our real life to get this, because most people don't.
So let's shift the conversation to trauma, which is kind of where we're going. That even, my reason for seeking out drugs, which is why, or psychiatry, I can't believe I just said drugs. No, I sought out psychiatry and got drugs. That's what my treatment was trauma. And I saw it when I was an intern as a therapist, that like all these people had something really horrible happen to them. And it's so easy for a clinician to just say, oh, you have insomnia. Oh, you're having a panic attack. Oh, let's treat the symptoms instead of look at what is the reason that you came here in the first place? What is the context that happened in? So can you talk about responses to trauma, how they look, your whole
Yes.
philosophy behind trauma.
Yeah. Oh, and I could talk about trauma for hours and hours. Believe it or not, okay, I'm not that old. I'm 40 now, but when I was in graduate school, like 12 years ago, maybe 13 years ago, anyhow, I'm not that old. I did not get a lick of training on trauma. That was not a part. I did a very clinical training program. Not one course talked about trauma. So everything, number one, I had to unlearn all of the dogma and brainwashing that I learned in graduate school. I had to unlearn that, in addition to carving out my own form of education around trauma. Because once I got into the field, I was like, yeah, nobody's talking about these questions, right? Of like, when we're supposed to do a clinical intake interview, when I was an intern, you know, they'd be like, what's wrong with you? You know, tell me your symptoms. That was how I was trained. And I quickly learned, like, that's the wrong question to lead with. Instead, it's what happened to you. Because if we are just looking at symptoms, we are going to chase our tail. It is my opinion that trauma is at the root of all mental illness. Every single diagnosis in the DSM is trauma-based. And that's a hard sell for a lot of people. And I understand that that's a radical viewpoint. But again, there's no pharmaceuticals that address trauma and PTSD. Okay, let's just take the nervous, because trauma resides in the nervous system. And so there's the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. Probably everybody's heard about fight or flight. So the parasympathetic nervous system is the state of physiology we're trying to get the body into in order to heal.
Oh, she froze. I don't know. Can you guys hear me, see me? Uh-oh, Kelly froze. Can you guys see Kelly or hear Kelly? Uh-oh. Bet you her computer died. Oh my goodness. All right, just stay with me. She'll be back, I'm sure. Hopefully she'll sign in on her phone or something. Well, I hope you're getting a lot out of this conversation because this is my favorite topic. Kelly's gone. Okay, Kelly will join us in a second, hopefully. I'm sure it was just her phone died. Let me text her and we'll pick back up where we left off. How y'all doing today? Kelly, I bet you her computer died. She'll be right back. Hold on. Thank you all for hanging in here with me. Sorry about this. The gods don't want us talking about this important subject. Oh my gosh. Well, we're going to have time for questions at the end, but Kelly does have to leave at like 20 after. Oh, here she comes. Here she comes. Hold on, hold on. Thanks for being so supportive. Oh, Kelly, you back?
We're back.
That's okay. Keep going. Start where you just pick up where you left off. Trauma affects the nervous system. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to use animals because animals in the wild actually a lot of how I understand trauma and the trauma response, because like saber-toothed tigers and birds, they don't walk around with trauma and PTSD. They just don't. So, and the reason is because they know how to discharge it from their nervous system. They know how to shake and tremble. So let's use predator and prey as an example. We could use certain industries that will remain nameless as the predator and psychiatric survivors as the prey. No, we'll use a lamb and a lion. Okay. So the lamb is minding its own business, grazing, and then all of a sudden the lion comes, and the lamb has three options at a nervous system level of how to respond to a threat. It can either run away, or it can try and fight, or it can roll over and play dead. So this particular lamb is like, oh no, there's no way I can outrun this or fight this. I'm just gonna, my immobilization response is gonna take over, and I'm gonna collapse, in the hopes that the lion will say, oh, look, that was easy. I'm gonna go get the rest of my family, and we're gonna come and have dinner. And as the lion's leaving to go get the family, the lamb can hop up and tremble and shake. Right? Now, humans don't understand this. And so our nervous system will get stuck in one of these three responses: fight, flight, freeze. Okay. So fight is going to look like, which is also hyper arousal of the nervous system, which means that on switch is just stuck on, and you're going to be anxious, angry, irritable, have a hard time sleeping, right? Like, so you can start to see how all these symptoms are actually a manifestation of traumatic energy that is lodged and trapped in the nervous system. Okay. So then hypoarousal is it's kind of like the fawn response, where we'll see kind of shrinking, kind of trying to get small, people pleasing, codependency, depression to some degree, withdrawing of internal resources, right? And then freeze is what we hear less about, but it's what I see most frequently clinically. So the freeze or immobilization response, you can also have depression in that, but it's really more of numbing and dissociation. And dissociation is something that's very important to understand when we're talking about trauma, because many people in psychiatric drug withdrawal dissociate from their body quite frequently. I would go out on a limb and say psychiatric drug withdrawal is a form of trauma. It is a form, when you wake up to this level of corruption and realize the level of deceit, and realize that when you try and go to a medical profession and they tell you, oh, you're crazy, it's all in your head, there's no way this could be happening to you, right? That's traumatic, because the people that unconsciously or consciously put you into this situation are washing their hands of you and saying, I got nothing, right? So like, that's a trauma in and of itself. So our nervous system can.
Yeah, we have some comments in the audience already that are talking about that. The going through withdrawal must be considered going through a trauma. The withdrawal symptoms are sheer terror. And I think specifically about last week, we talked about akathisia.
Yeah.
People that, including myself, I mean, I feel more traumatized by the withdrawal experience than I do my original trauma.
That's right, of course.
So
and this is a conversation that we need to have in this community to raise awareness about it, that like PTSD from extricating yourself from this system is real. It is so real. And I get pretty passionate and downright angry sometimes when I'm talking to professionals and they're invalidating people's experience. I feel pretty strongly about like just speaking up about this particular piece of the puzzle. So here's part of the conundrum in healing trauma, because I'm saying there are no good pharmaceuticals. There are plants and herbs that can assist, but it all depends on your gut health, what's happening with your thyroid, your hormone. Like, there's so many variables in getting your system back into a state of homeostasis. But Stephen Porges, the social engagement system, right? This is brilliant model for doing trauma healing, and it's based on this idea that a regulated nervous system can help a dysregulated nervous system just by the interaction, not the relationship. So a lot of therapists, which this is narcissistic in my opinion, and I can speak critically of therapists because I am one, and by the way, most therapists are wounded healers, so It's really hard to find a stellar therapist who's continuing to do their own work.
True.
Side note. But a lot of therapists would disagree with this statement. I don't think that I am the masterful one that has the attachment system that's going to heal you. That's ridiculous. That creates a system of codependency. I don't participate in that. It is your nervous system that's going to heal you, not me, and me being, a reparenting to you. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
However, if our nervous system is destabilized and we come into, this is mirror neurons, this is just biology, we come into contact with somebody that is regulated, it can drop our nervous system into that social engagement system part of the brain. However, the conundrum is that most people with trauma also have relationship or attachment trauma.
True.
And so trusting me, coming into the room with me and doing this with me doesn't feel safe. That's a threat to your nervous system. Do you see why that's a bind?
Yes.
Right? So now we're back to how can we empower the individual to be able to start to regulate their nervous system? Because I can't convince you that the world is a safe place and you should trust me. That's not, words are not going to do that. That's a felt sense. But step one is getting people to feel safe in their own bodies before they can feel safe in relationship with me. And so the best way I know to do that is the earth and nature. The Industrial Revolution, you can actually trace this. There is history behind this. The Industrial Revolution, the first one happened, people used to live outside. We were one with the earth. We listened to the rhythms of nature in order to plant crops. And technology and convenience stripped us of that. And it disconnected us from this relationship with the earth. This sounds crazy, but like shamanic cultures, people that lived on the land, people who were outside all day could communicate with their mind, with the earth, with the plants, with the animals. This was based on their survival. That seems insane to us now because we're so disconnected. We don't have a relationship with fire, for example. When we want to cook food or not be cold, we push a button or turn a knob. That's disconnected. Since the dawn of civilization, we had to go work with the element of fire in order to survive, right? So if somebody can't trust humans, and people have a lot of good reasons not to, then instead to, how can you start to trust the earth? How can you start to have faith in something that the sun is going to come up every day, right? That water is going to nourish you, right? How can we just start to reestablish a sense of safety and connection with the earth? So I don't know if that answered your question.
That's good. It's so good. And I'm aware of the time and we only have 20 minutes left. So I'm going to just jump over like 5 of the questions that I have and scoot because I know we could have so much good conversation about this last question. Well, maybe not last, but we'll see. So can you tell us about, okay, we already talked about some of the problems in the system and oh my God, I mean, this is one of the reasons why I didn't get licensed because there were so many problems. I could not go along with it. And maybe that'll come later. I don't know. Uh-oh, did Kelly freeze again? No, I hope not. I'm going to keep talking and see if she did. But anyway, so we talked about a lot of the problems with the mental health care system. So what are some of the solutions and what are you doing with this regenerative farming stuff? Oh, I think she's frozen again. Can you guys see her? I'm so sorry, y'all. Uh-oh, where'd she say? She's getting on her phone. Okay, she's getting on her phone. She'll be right back. I'm so sorry. If you all have any questions for Kelly, now is the time to type them in the chat box and Nicole will hand them to me. Nicole is graciously in the comments today. Thank you for hanging in there with us. We might have to do a replay of this. We'll see. She should be back here any second. I'm just waiting to click the button. There she is. Here she comes. connecting to audio. Oh, she's sideways. Can you flip it sideways?
Okay.
Can you flip your phone the other way? Because it's sideways. There we go.
There we go.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Third time's a
So,
charm. This happened now
yeah,
on my phone.
it's okay. So I basically just asked the question about, here's the problems with the mental health care system, talked about the problems. So what are some of the solutions? And can you talk more specifically about what you have going on in Austin with regenerative farming?
Okay. So I want to give a little bit of a theory. I have a working theory because I've been thinking about all of these issues for a while now. Part of the issue, I think, is that we actually don't know what's in the binders and fillers of these psychotropic medications. We really don't know. I've tried to track down what they put in the fillers and the binders, and you cannot access that information. I've heard some theories that there's B vitamins, yada yada yada, and that's part of what's happening in withdrawal. That you've got a B vitamin deficiency. Perhaps, but I think the B vitamin connection is more related to bacteria. So this all ties into healing the earth soil. Okay. So what I started to notice working with people in withdrawal is so many people have gut issues. And that was so curious to me. I was fascinated by this. And I just kept
my theory behind that is we take the pills and they hit our gut first. So of course it's breaking down in the gut. I mean, that can't be a good thing. And then when you take that away, the body is like, where's that drug that was, keeping things the way they were? I see. Oh, there you go. Okay.
Yeah. It's a foreign chemical. Your body's like, what's that? I don't know what to do with that. But I do suspect there's also something in the binders and fillers. And so what I've been seeing is people with candida infections and bacterial imbalances. Now, what we do know is that with any pharmaceutical, psychotropic or not, anything you take every day erodes the epithelial tissue of your small intestine, period. And so y'all probably already know this, but the small intestine houses 95% of the body's serotonin, estrogen, and progesterone production. Not the brain, it's in the gut. So I started getting super curious about this. I mean, in many ways, I think as you're taking it, it's suppressing your body's wisdom on how to heal itself. And then when you start to take that chemical away, the true damage starts to be revealed. And so what I suspect is happening is that chronic use of any pharmaceutical is creating leaky gut. So this is fascinating. This blew my mind when I uncovered this fact. Chemical farming, okay? Let me back up. I could talk about this for hours.
I know, yeah.
DuPont and Dow, okay? These were the two main corporations that started chemical farming in the 1970s in America. They were actually in the business of war chemicals before they moved over to big agriculture. So they were the ones that manufactured Agent Orange, okay? And then they repurposed it. And they're like, oh, now we're into farming. Now we're going to create something called Roundup. And you can trace this. I'm not making this up. When chemical farming practices started in America, the pharmaceutical industry started full blast. They didn't have direct to consumer marketing in the 70s, but this is when they really started pushing the chemical treatment of humans. So we started pushing chemicals into the earth and onto our food supply at the very same time that the pharmaceutical industry comes in and starts putting chemicals into humans. I find that pretty fascinating. Yep. So the standard American diet, or SAD is what we call it, is a guarantee to cause systemic inflammation in the body. It will cause anxiety and depression because your epithelial tissue, the gut lining tissue, is chronically inflamed. When your gut tissue becomes inflamed,
because of the Roundup, because of the chemicals that they're putting in the soil. Those chemicals kill all the good bacteria. Healthy soil is a commodity. We hardly have any of it in America anymore because of over farming. And so it kills bacteria. Throw in antibiotics into your system. That also, if you're eating factory farmed meat, it's full of antibiotics, yet another layer of killing the good bacteria. And so most of what you're putting in your mouth, if it is not regeneratively raised, even organic farm soil, they don't have to test it for the health of the soil. So a lot of organic farms are actually over farmed as well. This is where regenerative comes in. And so if we're eating foods that have bad bacteria predominantly, which is what the standard American diet is, and then we're taking a pharmaceutical on top of that, it's a recipe for health consequences. And you can't just start throwing probiotics. A lot of people in withdrawal can't tolerate probiotics. And that is because we must address the leaky gut first before you try and rebalance the bacteria profile in the gut. And so again, I am incredibly passionate about bacteria. It is a majority of what we are as humans. We don't truly understand it. I really think, and this is part of the vision I have with creating this farm, is like to create targeted probiotic strains that are specifically for psychiatric drug withdrawal. I think the wave of mental health, we're going to step away slowly. This is my vision, from pharmaceuticals and move more towards probiotics for mental health. And you know, there's so many other plants that can do the same thing as the pharmaceuticals. Did you know that the pharmaceutical industry is considered biopirates? That in the 1960s, they went, yet another form of colonialism, they went onto boats down to Mexico, talked to indigenous healers and curanderas, stole all their knowledge about the plants, and then came back to America and started, you know, making these pharmaceuticals based on the knowledge of the plants. Shamans in the rainforest, in the jungle, are the original pharmacists. A shaman can go, and there's 4,000 plants, right, in the jungle, and they can point to each one and say, this one is for high blood pressure, this one is for insomnia, right? So like, we have neglected back. This is how we go back to the earth. The earth loves us and wants us to be healthy. If we can restore the soil, the mental health, physical health, all of it, is the foundation is healthy soil. And we're killing the earth. We are. And we can course correct if we choose to. But what I'm trying to say is, like, there's a plant in nature that is a better pharmaceutical choice because you're going to have less side effects and pretty much no withdrawal symptoms.
I often think about that, all the lost wisdom, you know, like even something simple like when I was a kid, we used to rub iodine on a cut. We don't do that anymore. Now there's like an antiseptic spray, an alkaline peroxide. Like where have we've lost touch so much with our ancestors and even generations in our family. The tradition dies. Little things like using iodine, you know?
Yes, totally.
So can you explain to the audience, because regenerative farming, I am extremely familiar with it because one of our filmmakers is really into it. And we actually attended a conference, the Weston A. Price Foundation.
Yes.
And so I got really involved with all that stuff. And I actually even started the GAPS diet a little bit for the leaky gut and the gut symptoms. But can you explain to them what is regenerative farming and what's the difference between regenerative and organic?
Okay. So regenerative farming, the whole premise is healing the soil. And how we heal soil is based on the microbes in the soil. And so how we do this is in conjunction with humanely, sustainably raised livestock. The animals are a part of the farming practice. Right now, conventional farming separates animals. If you've ever seen factory farming of animals, it is horrendous. It is horrific. And that's part of the downfall, is we're separating plants and animals. They are supposed to be together. They work together. The poop is a very big, important piece of regenerative farming. The manure helps to replenish the microbes in the soil. It all works together. You also do crop rotation. You do not till the land. It is going back to indigenous ways of farming, which included crop rotation, which including no-till, which includes having multiple different forms of livestock. And then you do not plant one monocrop and do that every single year. You harvest, you plant something different, and you keep rotating. And so it is a brilliant way to heal the earth. And then obviously you do not use chemicals. So it is organic in many ways. And interestingly, one of the ways around pesticides and herbicides, wait for it, is bacteria. So you can spray good bacteria on, it depends on what crop you're trying to grow. And it's fine for the plant, but it's not good for the bugs, right? Or you can have chickens who are going to eat the bugs, right? Like, it's this symbiotic relationship of working with nature instead of against it. And I can tell you that there's a lot of resistance to it, because conventional farmers, and I'm already talking to them. So I live in Texas. There are a lot of farmers and ranchers out here. The land that I have is my great grandmother's land. It's been in my family for 100 years. They've been doing conventional farming on it for many decades. And so the soil is dead. The soil is these many, many levels of healing. And that's what we're working on first. We're going to heal the soil, and then we're going to start working with the animals. But suffice it to say, as I start to, it's much like my experiences of being in the mental health field. I start talking about, hey, there's alternatives to chemicals. And people look at me like I have a third eye and I'm insane, because they think that I am criticizing them. And it's not that. It's not a criticism. It's like, hey, can't we just do it this way? Why can't we do it
Yeah,
different way?
Or a better, like a more, I don't know. It's like a more holistic view of nature. Cause I can tell you, living in a van, I travel across the whole country, and Texas was the worst, but you can see the color of the soil is like light brown. It doesn't even look like dirt. Like, and it's because it's been so over farmed. And then I drive past CAFOs, the cows are packed, 200, and they're standing on a pile of their own shit.
Yeah,
that is not natural, and that is what you're eating. But we're so disconnected from even that we don't see those problems. So we think you get a burger from McDonald's, it's fine. It's like, but do you think about where it came from, and the fear that animal felt, and like the life that it lived, and that energy that you're putting in your body? That sounds crazy, I know, but that's my gift from coming through this experience, is that my eyes are open to like the whole world, like, oh my God, I was asleep, all these things,
Totally. It's very disturbing when you wake up to the truth of what's happening, and you are eating that animal's trauma. You are eating their cortisol. And so regenerative farming is it's a new way. And so the vision I've had this vision for 5 years, and we're finally doing it. My husband is my business partner, and so we're really excited to work together. But the vision is we're going to create the farm first. And then it's going to be a working farm. So mental health farms are very popular in the UK. There's not that many in the US. But this is my contribution to helping create a paradigm shift in mental health treatments in America. So once we have the farm up and running, then we're going to build in the mental health piece. So it's going to be a 30-bed facility. It's going to be tiny houses, so people can have separate private living areas. And the goal is to bring people who want to safely taper off of psychiatric drugs, and or do very deep trauma healing work away from the rat race. And part of the treatment is like, you are working on a farm. You're coming to reestablish your connection with the earth, to learn about how to heal your gut, to learn about how these systems all work together. You have a sense of shared community and purpose. And then a big part of what we're going to have, because this isn't going to be like, this is an alternative to a psychiatric hospital, but it's more of nature retreat working farm experience. And so we will have, some healthcare help, but it's all going to be with people like me who are renegades, who don't believe in the medical model and don't subscribe to all of that, for some level of medical oversight. But primarily it's going to be peer led, because that's the model I believe is what's really going to shift mental health treatments. Because the problem is that we are brainwashed, we are conditioned to give our authority over to an expert. This is what led us to the issues with psychiatry, is we thought this doctor knew more than us about us. And what I'm trying to educate is like, no, you're the expert on you. You're the only one inside your unconscious mind. Nobody knows more about you than you, and nobody is inside your nervous system. Therefore, you're the only one that can heal yourself. And so we've got to get out of this conditioning of the mind that there's something outside of us that's going to fix us. It is all inside of you already, and we forgot. We've been intentionally misled. And so what I envision in the wave of the future of mental health is, yes, probiotics working with good bacteria to rebalance bacteria, and also peer-led community-based mental health treatments. I would love to work myself out of these credentials, because I think they're bullshit. I mean, I think that it's ridiculous that people come to me and think like I am the expert and I have all the answers. Like, no, that's ridiculous. That just put me in a position of power over you, and I will not participate in that. That's not how healing works. Healing doesn't work by us developing codependency. That's some therapist model, but I don't participate in that. And so I am trying to teach people how to reclaim their sovereignty, how to pick up their own medicine and turn and transform this poison into medicine, because it is possible. It's really hard to believe that when you're in the middle of withdrawal. But like, in some ways, this is what it took for you to wake up. And I really wish that it didn't have to come with so much suffering. But everybody I know that's awake to this corruption and it can see through this deception, they had to have their own lived experience. Yeah. That's why I'm here doing what I'm doing. I wouldn't have woken up to it either. So
I know that to be true. I mean, just you saying that, I felt the tears almost come. Like, she's right. Like, you woke up, you're awake now. You can't go back to sleep after that, you know?
Right.
But okay, we have 2 minutes left, and I just want to get to one question that's asked a few different ways in the comments, and then you can hang up whenever you have to, and I'll close this out.
We can go a couple minutes over. It's okay.
Okay. The question is really, people with no money or access to people like you and access to healthy diets, how do they heal?
Okay, great question. So part of what I want to do with this farm is create a different model, not based on capitalism, for healing, because that's one of the biggest criticisms I've had of still participating in this, is that only the rich elite can come afford me. So I want to create a structure where it's a sliding scale, and whoever wants to be able to access holistic healing can. Okay, so that's in the future. But for right now, if you probably already know about it, but if you don't, connect with survivingantidepressants.com.
I think it's .org.
.org. Sorry.
That's okay.
Sometimes that message board can be a little triggering, because you can go down this rabbit hole of reading, stories of the worst of the worst. But I do think that it's good to find comrades in the trenches. Find somebody on there that you can connect with offline. You need a peer support. And I understand it is virtually impossible to find that in the real world, because there's so few people that really understand this. So there are other forums. I mean, Dr. Healy has his risk RX. I think that is something to that. Laura Delano has the Inner Compass Initiative, which is also kind of a networking site. So I think out of the three of those, just start trying to connect with people. And it's almost like, I mean, it's almost like the AA model. And I'm not going to go down that soapbox because I have, some opinions about that. I'm not saying that people in psychiatric drug withdrawal need AA, but I'm saying like we almost need a sponsor. We need some like a peer who understands, to just even have a text relationship with, just somebody to be like, oh my God, I think this is going to kill me, right? Like talk me down, right? So I think finding somebody, even if they live on a different part of the world, that would be, that would be foundational. And then we know from actual scientific research, which by the way, most scientific research in relationship to pharmaceutical drugs is skewed and not actually scientific research based on the scientific method. However, there is a lot of studies showing that 3 to 6 hours spent out in nature is equivalent to an SSRI in terms of mood benefit. And so depending on what climate you live in, right, like going outside as much as you possibly can, even if you have akathisia, even if you have like debilitating symptoms and you feel like you can't get out of the house, go into your backyard, go outside. You don't have to walk. You can just sit there. The earth will help you to regulate your nervous system. And I know that sounds too easy, but it is huge. Sunlight goes a long way in helping homeostasis back into the body. So finding some sort of peer support and then just literally spending as many hours outside every day that you can.
I love it. Thank you, Kelli.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us today. And do you have any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
I would just like to say to anybody in the middle of psychiatric drug withdrawal that that on some level you are incredibly resilient. And I know it doesn't feel like that yet, but it is one of the hardest, most difficult experiences a human being could go through. And you're doing it primarily in isolation. And so deep bow to all of those who feel like they can't do it another day. I am here to tell you that there is hope. I know it is very hard to feel that and it feels so impossible, but I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that the body knows how to heal itself, period. And it will, and it can. So keep hope that your body has wisdom and it knows how to recover from this. And on some level, you will have gifts from this experience. And I know those seem so far away when you're in the middle of it, but like having a psychic physical injury to you opens you up to deeper ways of being a human. And so hold on to the fact that there actually might be some good that comes out of this tragedy.
I know there's a lot of people in the audience that needed to hear that today. So thank you for saying that, Kelli.
Thank you.
All right. So thank you all for joining us for this live discussion. If you haven't seen Medicating Normal yet, please check our website at medicatingnormal.com/watch. We have a $7 screening right now that you could hang up and go watch the film right now if you haven't seen it yet. We also add more screenings often, so be sure to check our website. Also on our website, we have alternatives, resources, a reading list, a place for withdrawal, and a bunch of research written. So we have a lot of really great things there. Please take advantage of it. Our next interview is with Christina Kaiser. She's a safety advocate and mother of a teenager who died by suicide from akathisia after taking psychiatric drugs. The week after that, Nicole will speak with Dr. Joanna Moncrief. She's a psychiatrist from the UK and author of The Myth of the Chemical Cure, kind of on the same theme that the chemical is not going to fix the trauma. If you have any ideas for any upcoming interviews, please feel free to email us at medicatingnormal@gmail.com. If you'd like to support our efforts, please consider a donation, even small, at medicatingnormal.com. And thank you for joining us today. A deep bow to you, Kelli, for all your work. And I'll have you know that I'm a Texas resident and I live in a van, so I will be driving to you.
You gotta come out to the farm.
You need help? Like I can shovel whatever you need. I'm there.
We're looking for volunteers, so send me
Sign me up.
yes.
I'll be there in the winter in Austin, summer in the north. That's how I roll. All right.
That's
Thank
right.
you all. Kelli, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Enjoy your day.
Bye.
Bye.